I collapsed at the St. Andrew's Community Fair on a Saturday afternoon in late June, and by the time the paramedics loaded me into the ambulance, my son had already been called 11 times. He didn't answer once. By the time I woke up 3 days later with a breathing mask over my face and tubes in both arms, the hospital had tried to reach him 39 times. And while I lay unconscious in the cardiac care unit, my son was posting videos of himself at an all-inclusive resort in Cancun. His caption on the last one read, "Finally unplugged, family first, no stress, no noise, just us." I was the noise. Before I go any further, if stories about family, loyalty, and finding your strength when it matters most resonate with you, I'd be grateful if you'd take a moment to like this video and subscribe to this channel. It means more than you know. And I should mention, some details in this story have been adjusted for privacy. But the heart of it, everything I'm about to tell you, is real, or real enough. The St. Andrew's Community Fair runs every June in the parking lot, behind the community center on Wellington Street, North, the same one that's been there since the neighborhood was new. I'd been volunteering at the donated books table for 11 years. The morning was that particular kind of Ontario June morning, warm without being heavy, the sky so blue it looked painted. I had 3 cardboard boxes to sort through, a thermos of dark roast, and nowhere else I'd rather be. The pain started around noon, low and tight, like someone had cinched a belt across my ribs and was slowly pulling. I told myself it was the heat. I sat down on the folding chair behind the table and breathed through it. The woman at the next booth, selling jams, glanced over. "You look pale," she said. "I'm fine," I told her. I wasn't fine. The tightness became pressure. The pressure became something else entirely. Spreading across my chest, down my left arm, narrowing my vision at the edges. I grabbed the edge of the table. The book spines blurred. And then I heard a voice above me calling my name, and the table was no longer in my hands. What came next arrived in pieces, a face I recognized, a voice steady and close, someone folding a jacket under my head, sirens, a paramedic asking me to keep my eyes open, to stay with him, the Ontario sky very blue, and then the ceiling of the ambulance, and then nothing at all. Sharon rode with me in the ambulance. She told the paramedics she was my emergency contact, which wasn't technically true, but no one questioned it, and I wouldn't have changed it if they had. She signed the consent forms when we arrived. She sat through 6 hours of surgery. She held my hand through the railing of the gurney before they took me into the operating room, and the last thing I saw before the anesthesia pulled me under was her face through the small square window, watching. She'd been my student once. 22 years ago, she sat in the back row of my grade 7 English class, with her head down and her hair loose over her face. Brand new to Canada, brand new to English, terrified of everything. The other kids weren't cruel, exactly. They simply didn't see her. And quiet children are the ones who need you to notice. I stayed after school with her 3 afternoons a week for that entire first year. We read together, slowly and carefully. I found her a library card. I helped her fill out the application form. By June, she was reading chapter books on her own. By high school, she was writing essays that made me put down my red pen and simply read. She came back to visit when she graduated, and again when she finished her social work degree at McMaster. She sends me a card every September, first day of school, without fail. The morning I woke up in the cardiac unit, Shirin was asleep in the chair beside my bed, her neck at an angle that would hurt later. The beeping of the monitors brought her awake immediately. Her eyes found mine, and for a moment she looked exactly like that 12-year-old girl. Frightened and working very hard not to show it. Then she exhaled and reached for my hand. "You're back," she said. I looked at the empty chair on the other side of the bed. The chair where my son should have been sitting. The nurse who came in was kind and efficient. She explained the diagnosis, a significant blockage in the left anterior descending artery, a stent placed during the procedure, 6 hours of surgery total. She explained the medication, the rehabilitation, the dietary changes. "Your heart is stable," she said. "You gave everyone quite a fright." "Has my family been reached?" I asked. She paused the way people do when they are choosing their words carefully. "We've been trying to reach your son repeatedly," she said. 39 attempts over 72 hours between the hospital and the paramedic unit. Voicemails, direct calls, the contact form on file. I said, "His phone must have been off." Sharon looked at her hands. She didn't say anything. I said quietly, "Can I see your phone?" She hesitated for just a moment. Then she unlocked it and handed it to me without a word. My son's Instagram profile. I don't spend much time on social media. My late husband always said I was the last person in Canada still writing letters by hand, and he wasn't entirely wrong. But I knew enough to understand what I was looking at. The first post, Sunday morning, less than 18 hours after the ambulance left the fairgrounds, a video. My son standing at the edge of an infinity pool, a Mexican sky flat and blue behind him. My daughter-in-law beside him laughing, her sunglasses pushed up into her hair. My grandson at the far edge of the frame, already in the water, his orange floaties vivid against the blue. Caption finally unplugged. "Family first, no stress, no noise, just us." "Scroll down," I said. Monday afternoon, my grandson crouched over a sandcastle, my son beside him, both of them grinning at the camera. Caption, "Beach dad life, no complaints." Tuesday evening, my son and daughter-in-law at a candlelit table, tropical drinks with paper umbrellas, the kind of photo people post to make their life look like a magazine. Caption, "Date night in paradise." Grateful for this woman and this life. They had service, they had Wi-Fi, they had enough connectivity to post 4 curated photographs of their happiness while the hospital phone rang and went to voicemail 39 times. I handed Sharon her phone. She set it face down on the bedside table. After a while, I said, "There is no version of this where they didn't know." She said, "No, there isn't." I looked at the empty chair again. Then I closed my eyes and let the medication pull me back toward sleep, and as I drifted, I found myself in another hospital room entirely. 2 years ago, different walls, different machines, same antiseptic smell. My husband, after 8 months of illness, finally at the end. I had called my son. I said, "Honey, I think you need to come this week, not the weekend, this week." He said, "There's a deal closing Thursday. I've been on this file for 4 months. Can he hold on until the weekend?" I said, "I don't think so." He said, "Mom, I can't just drop everything." My husband passed on a Wednesday morning. My son arrived Friday afternoon. He stayed through the funeral Saturday and left Sunday morning. He had calls to get back to. At the service, people kept telling me how composed he was, how strong, how well he was holding together. I smiled and said thank you. What I thought was, composed is easy when you've missed the hard parts. The 2 years since had been a slow accumulation of small absences, a pattern I kept explaining away, kept finding reasons for, kept absorbing into the category of busy people with demanding lives. My grandson's first day of kindergarten, I offered to come. "We're good, Mom. It's kind of a family moment." The first Christmas after my husband passed, my son and his wife came for dinner and stayed 3 hours. Last Christmas, they flew to her parents in Calgary for the full week. Just easier, given the flights. And 3 months before the fair, my son called on a Sunday to mention they were doing a resort trip in late June. His wife needed to decompress. Family time was important. No invitation extended to me. I said, "That sounds wonderful. You deserve a break." When I hung up, I sat alone at the kitchen table for a long time. The reading glasses my husband had left, in the drawer beside the stove, were still there. I still hadn't moved them. On the 5th day of my hospital stay, Sharon went to my house to pick up some clothes and my reading glasses. She has a key. She'd been watering my plants for years when I traveled. When she returned, her face was different than it had been all week. Quieter, more controlled. She set the bag down. She was holding an envelope. "There was mail," she said. "I sorted the bills and the flyers. But this one I thought you should see yourself. Before I tell you what was inside that envelope, I need to ask you something. If you've ever discovered that someone you loved was making plans behind your back, please leave a comment below. And if you believe it's never too late to take back your own life, let me know you're still with me. What I found changed everything." The envelope was addressed to my house. The return print indicated a real estate brokerage, but the email address in the header was my son's personal account. Someone had printed an email thread and mailed it, routed through the brokerage's correspondence system, delivered to my mailbox like any other piece of mail. My hands were steadier than I expected. The subject line, potential listing inquiry, Elmwood property. My son's email at the top, a realtor's name below, my daughter-in-law CC'd. He was asking about timelines for listing a property on behalf of a family member who might be relocating. He used that word, relocating. He asked about comparable sales in the area. He asked whether the agent handled estate situations, specifically cases where a homeowner was transitioning to assisted living or long-term care. The agent had replied asking whether the homeowner had agreed to the listing. My son's response, one line below, still working through that conversation with her. "We want to be proactive about her care options." The date on the email, 11 days before I collapsed. Sharon sat very still across from me. She'd already read it. I could see it in her face. I said, "He was planning to sell my house." She nodded. I thought about the word he'd chosen. Proactive, a business word, a responsible-sounding word. As though the decision about where I lived and what happened to the house my husband and I had paid off together over 3 decades. The house we'd painted 3 different colors before settling on sage green. The house where my son had learned to walk in the front hallway. Had already moved out of my hands and into his. He didn't want me in a care facility because he was worried about me. He wanted me in a care facility so he could sell the house. I already knew what the house was worth. My husband and I had spoken about it before he died. The Burlington market had done what it had done in recent years. Our 1970s bungalow on Elmwood Avenue, with the garden my husband had tended for 30 years, was worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $900,000. Perhaps more. $900,000. And my son had a realtor on standby. I lay back and looked at the ceiling. The monitor beeped its steady rhythm. Outside, the June light was turning gold, that long Ontario light that stays so late in summer. I thought about every hockey practice I'd driven him to at 5:30 in the morning. Every university essay I'd proofread, the mortgage on his first condo that I'd co-signed, the delivery room when my grandson was born, my son holding my hand, saying he didn't know anything could feel like this, and both of us crying. Then I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. Her name was Moira, and she'd been handling estate matters in this city for 26 years. Methodical, unsentimental, precise, exactly the qualities I needed. When she answered, I said, "I'm calling from the hospital. I had a heart attack 6 days ago." She said, "Good God, are you all right?" "Physically, I'm going to be fine," I said, "but I need to revise my will completely before I leave this hospital." She listened to everything without interrupting. The 39 calls, the Instagram posts, the email about the Elmwood property. When I finished, she said, quietly, "This is not the first time I've heard something like this. What are my options?" "We can revise the will entirely," she said. "Establish an education trust for your grandson with an independent trustee, structured so neither of his parents can access it until he's 18. We can make charitable bequests. We can remove your son as beneficiary. All of it is within your legal rights, Vivian. And I'll have your attending physician document your cognitive capacity in writing so it's completely ironclad. Are you certain it can't be contested?" They can try, she said. Court costs for estate litigation in Ontario run between $15,000 and $40,000. They won't win. Do it, I said. We worked out the details over 2 calls in the following 48 hours. The house would remain mine, managed through a trust with Moira as trustee, for as long as I chose to live there. My TFSA and RRIF would fund a scholarship in my husband's name at my old school, Hillcrest Middle School, where I'd taught for 31 years. $20,000 to the St. Andrews Community Center on Wellington Street. An education trust of $50,000 for my grandson, paid directly to any accredited institution upon his enrollment, with no parental access, managed solely by Moira. And $50,000 to Shirin. She was in the room when I told Moira. She looked up from her book and shook her head. You don't have to, she said. I said, I know I don't have to. That's the whole point. My son called 9 days after I collapsed. I'd been home 3 days by then, moving carefully through my own rooms, relearning the quiet of my own house. His name lit up the screen, and I let it ring twice before I answered. Mom. Oh God, Mom. His voice was high, rushed, breathless in a way that would have convinced me once. I just saw all the messages. We were completely offline. The resort had terrible international service. I said, You had enough service to post to Instagram 4 times. Silence. The hospital called you 39 times, I said. I was unconscious for 3 days, and you posted a photo of date night in paradise. Mom, if I had known how serious. You did know, I said. They left voicemails. They were clear. You made a choice. More silence. Then, we were worried about you, living alone at your age. We thought we were just trying to be proactive about. I know about the email, I said. The one about the Elmwood property. The realtor. A different silence this time. Heavier. I said, I'll see you in my lawyer's office on Friday at 2. They arrived 4 minutes late, both in business clothes. My daughter-in-law wore black. My son wore the gray suit he reserves for client meetings. They stopped when they saw Shirin seated beside me at the conference table. My daughter-in-law said, Why is she here? I said, Because she was there. Moira ran the meeting with quiet authority. My son tried twice to redirect the conversation, and she simply spoke past him, not unkindly, but without pause. When she reached the disbursements, my son leaned forward. I watched his face move through several expressions. Confusion, then calculation, then something younger and less controlled. He said, What is this? Moira slid a document across the table. Cardiac assessment, 3 pages, all faculties documented. This is your mother's legally executed revised will, she said. Witnessed, signed, and accompanied by written cognitive assessment from her cardiologist. It is binding. My daughter-in-law stood up. You just had a heart attack. You're not thinking clearly. Someone is obviously. Moira set down her pen. They are welcome to pursue litigation, she said, evenly. Average costs for this type of challenge in Ontario run between $15,000 and $40,000. Success rate in cases with documented capacity is extremely low. My son looked at me across the table. His face was doing something I hadn't seen from him since he was a boy. Something uncertain. He said, Mom, why are you doing this? I said, When your grandfather had his heart attack, your father took the first flight he could get. He slept in the hospital for 4 nights, and when you were born and couldn't breathe on your own for the first 24 hours, your father and I did not leave that NICU once. We stayed. I said, I'm not punishing you. I'm reflecting back the value you placed on this relationship. You decided what I was worth to you. I'm simply deciding what you're worth to me. He said, And the house? I said, Is mine for as long as I choose. He said, We'll contest this. Moira, you're welcome to try. They left without saying goodbye. My daughter-in-law's heels were loud in the hallway. Then the elevator. Then gone. Moira gathered her papers. She looked at me across the table. How are you feeling? I said, like myself, for the first time in 2 years. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected. My son called twice. I let both calls go. My daughter-in-law didn't call at all. Rochelle from the community center came by with a casserole and stayed for 2 hours. And I told her most of it, and she sat with the weight of it the way good friends do, without trying to explain it away. Cardiac rehabilitation started 3 weeks after discharge. Twice a week at the hospital, supervised exercise, a small group of people who had each had their hearts behave badly in one way or another. I found I liked the company of people who understood that recovering is not the same as returning to what you were before. We were all becoming something slightly different, slightly more honest as about what mattered. 7 weeks after surgery, the doorbell rang on a Tuesday afternoon. I opened the door. My grandson stood on the front step, a little taller than I remembered, holding Sharon's hand and looking up at me with his grandfather's eyes, wide and brown and completely unguarded. "Hi, Grandma," he said. "You were sick." "I was," I said. "I'm better now." He held up a drawing rolled into a tube with an elastic band. He'd made it when his mom told him I was in the hospital. He'd kept it because she forgot to send it. I unrolled it at the kitchen table. 2 stick figures, a large yellow sun, a house with a green door. Accurate, I have a green door. Shaky letters across the top. "Get well, Grandma, I miss you." He watched me read it very carefully. I said, "This is going on the refrigerator right now." He said, "Can we have hot chocolate?" I said, "We absolutely can." Sharon stood in the kitchen doorway while I heated the milk, watching the two of us. "She didn't say anything. I didn't say anything." My grandson told me about his swimming lessons and a book he was reading at school and a bird that had built a nest outside his classroom window. I listened to every word. I didn't ask whether his parents knew he was here. Some things are better left unasked. It has been 3 months now, October, and the maple at the end of my driveway has gone the color of embers. I take a walk every morning, a little longer each week, my cardiologist marking the progress with something that looks almost like pride. I've rejoined the library book club that I'd let lapse after my husband died. I've registered with a newcomer literacy program at the community center, 3 mornings a week, helping adults build their English and their lives in a new country. I thought about Sharon, 12 years old, head down in the back row. I thought about what it means to be the person who simply notices. I've also booked a trip. 7 days in Cape Breton in the spring, the Sea Cliffs, the Cabot Trail, the kind of coast my husband always said we'd get to eventually. We never did. I'm not waiting anymore. The house on Elmwood Avenue is still mine. The sage green paint on the front door is slightly weathered, and I've decided I like it that way. I may sell eventually, when I'm ready, on my terms, and put the money wherever I decide it should go. That is not a small thing. That is, it turns out, almost everything. People ask whether I hope my son and I will reconcile. I don't know how to answer that without also knowing who he might become. I miss the version of him I believed I was raising, the one who would have gotten on the first flight. Some days I grieve that version actually existed and is simply gone now. Other days I think maybe he was always more complicated than I let myself see, and the grief is for my own blindness as much as anything. What I know is simpler than any of that. I stopped making myself smaller to fit the space someone else had decided I deserved. I stopped answering calls that cost more than they gave. I stopped waiting. And into that space, Ben's drawing on my refrigerator, Sharon's voice every Sunday, Tuesday mornings at the library with people who are glad to see me come through the door. My morning walk, longer every week, my heart doing its quiet, faithful work. The flight to Nova Scotia leaves in April. I have a window seat. My husband would have liked that. He always said I deserved more window seats. He was right. It just took me a little longer to agree.